Right. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to get started in just a minute or so, just to let everyone get in as they're still dialing in. Okay, I am going to get started. I think we still have folks dialing in on the line, but I'll start off with an introduction. Thank you so much for joining us for today's SEPTA Bus Revolution community webinar. Tonight's meeting will cover proposed route changes in West Philadelphia and Center City. My name's Chris Fawcett, and I'm a planner at Michael Baker International. I'm supporting SEPTA on the bus revolution. Keaton, if you could advance to slide 2, please. All right, thank you. We're going to start off with a quick introduction before moving on to some of the key themes of what we heard throughout this project. Then we'll get into specific examples of proposed route changes and provide information on what to expect over the next year and how you can also provide more feedback. We'll wrap the meeting up with a question and answer section. We'll answer your questions on the proposed route changes. But before moving on, we'd like to gather some information through polling question to learn more about who's joined the webinar tonight. As you can see on the screen, these are the most common routes used by the bus riders on today's webinar. I'm going to start off by launching our first poll tonight. And we would just like to know, which parts of the SEPTA region do you most often travel to? This could be for work, school, etc. And you can choose up to 2 questions. Okay, I'm going to leave up the polling for a couple more seconds before I close the poll. Okay, and thanks so much for your responses. Looks like we have the most being in Center City, with second being in West Philly. And I'm going to ask just 2 more questions. Okay, and we'd also like to know what types of bus revolution engagement activities have you participated in? If this is your first time, welcome. And if you've joined us before, please let us know where else you've joined. Okay, and I'll leave the poll open up for a few more seconds. Okay, and thank you all so much for joining today. I'm just going to ask one more question. Sorry about that. Just having some Zoom troubles. We just want to know, when did you first hear about the bus revolution? All right, and I'll also leave the poll open up for a few more seconds. All right, thank you so much for your participation. I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Thanks, Chris. You can go to the next slide, Keaton. So my name is Dan Emmeroff. I work for SEPTA. I am the project manager for Bus Revolution, which, as many of you probably know, is the authority's first attempt at redesigning its bus network. I've been with you, for many of you, for the last couple of years, trying to steer this project through its different phases. And before we get into the proceedings and sort of going through some of the feedback we got and then some of the components of the updated draft, I do want to just thank everyone. From the last round of engagement, we got thousands of comments. We made significant revisions based on those comments. And what I think we have here is something that meets some of the criticisms and feedback that we got from our customers, as well as some of the goals that we have in our project. We know it's not going to make everyone super happy, but we also think that we do have a mandate to make our system faster and more reliable and more effective for more people. So we are trying to kind of balance all of these different priorities. But we do want to thank you, for all of the time and attention you spent with us on webinars or at public meetings, and all the time you spent writing, really thoughtful, critical feedback. Next slide, please. So we hear you. We know we needed to make some changes. Next slide. And here's what we are. So now I'm going to go through sort of some of the themes that we got. The themes that arose during the last round of engagement. So, like I said, we got thousands of comments, and some were very specific, some were more general in nature, but there were some themes that arose, and I'm going to highlight some of them here. So, as you can all expect, we heard a lot about transfers and one-seat rides. A one-seat ride, obviously, being something that where you're not transferring, it takes you directly from the point where you start to the point where you finish without having to switch vehicles. We heard a lot about routes or route segments being eliminated. We heard a ton about personal safety and security, which is understandable. I do use the L on a daily basis, so I am fully aware of what challenges exist in our system, and I was, stuff that nobody likes to see. We heard a lot about access to schools, based on that initial draft. We also heard, about frequency, weekend service, and simplicity. And these were the themes that arose. These were sort of when we reconvened the technical team after the last round of engagement. We were really focused on, these types of themes that arose and how we could address them in the update. Next slide, please. So a lot of the feedback we got was critical of the draft, which, again, was understandable and was what we expected. But we did hear some positive notes about some of the things that we were trying to accomplish. So we heard an appreciation of the increased service frequency, even if ultimately people didn't agree with some of the alignment changes we proposed. So we want to try to keep as much frequency in the network as we can, frequent service being 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week. People did like some of the simpler component aspects of the bus network. They liked that we were trying to stay on more major thoroughfares, that we were trying to turn less. The fact that we turn so much, the fact that we operate on really narrow rights of way makes our system less reliable than it could be. So we worked really closely with our operations department to figure out, what parts of the current system present unique operational challenges and what we should consider changing in order to, again, to speed service up, make it more reliable, make it more attractive for people. And then we wanted to focus on connectivity. we wanted people to be able to get further faster using the system. Obviously, certain changes make that, it's not a universal thing, but we were trying to use our transportation centers and leverage those so people can make, easier connections and have more options so that they could use the system for more reasons. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through these kind of a little more specifically now. So we heard people say, why are you making me a transfer? Why are you making me transfer? I have a really short, easy trip. So we've updated this draft network to reduce the number of transfers overall. We prioritized once it rides for short trips. So, something that we looked at really closely was average trip length, both in terms of duration and miles. And we saw that people use SEPTA buses to go, very short distances. So it's really easy to mess up a short trip. So we wanted to prioritize once it rides for those short trips, 20, 30 minutes, 2-3 miles. And then we wanted to prioritize trips with strong ridership. So when there's a clear desire for a large group of people to get from one general location to another, we wanted to put that back in. So that was one type of comment we got. We also heard a lot about school service. So we've been meeting with the school district and talking with them and always had the plan to kind of to put the school service back in. Our approach to this was a mistake. We should have been leading with this. This is a big issue for us. So we've sort of amped up our focus on school service. We did make some changes based on sort of the type of service we provide and how many school trips were on specific routes. And then we wanted to make sure that we adjusted service span and service headway so that we were providing extra service at key times to make sure there weren't overcrowding on certain routes when students would be traveling. Next slide, please. We heard a lot about safety in the system, both in terms of people being asked to transfer to the Broad Street or the Market Frankfurt line, or people people being potentially forced to wait at a location they were unfamiliar with. So again, we did kind of put back a lot of the short trips that people are already currently making in the system that would have potentially turned into transfers in the first draft. But we're also focusing on our SCOPE program, which is our strategy to address safety, security, and the challenges of the vulnerable population in the system. We're also working with our partners throughout the region, primarily the city of Philadelphia, to focus on intersections where there are already large numbers of transfers going on, looking at things like lighting, sidewalk, amenities, that type of thing. And we will continue to focus on safety and security so that everyone feels comfortable using SEPTA. This is a long-term goal, obviously, but it's something that we need to keep working on. Next slide, please. So the other thing we heard a lot about were some of the route numbers. We adopted a 3-digit numbering system in several rounds ago. We kind of kept it in place for the first draft, and I think it caused a lot of confusion, especially amongst those who were just starting to pay attention to the project. So we've updated the draft network to use as many of the existing numbering as possible. This is so that we can keep reference to the ones that people are familiar with, so that if their route isn't changing, the number is not changing either. We will keep this conversation going. We are still using 3 digits on either new routes or routes that have changed so much they're really not. There's not really a route in the existing system that you can compare it to. And we do know that we are going to change some of the numbers in the system. For example, delettered routes will be changed. We just don't know to what yet. Next slide, please. So before I hand it off to Keaton, who is one of our consultants, I do want to just kind of do a by the numbers look at the existing network, so what we currently have in place versus the updated draft. So we've updated this based on this revised draft. So there are 10 fewer bus routes overall. This is up significantly from the previous draft, where I believe there were 99 or 100. We are still providing a higher level of frequency than in the existing network, although since there are more routes than in the first draft, that percentage goes down. We are still proposing implementing on-demand or microtransit as part of this, although these zones are all in the exurban, sort of suburban part of our system. So it's not something folks in Center City and West Philly would necessarily use. And the number of service hours is still flat. So, we've been saying all along, this is a budget neutral project. We have 3.8 million hours of revenue service hours that we currently provide. We are still providing that, but we are proposing to do it in a different way. So those things, this is sort of like the by the numbers look. So now I'm going to hand it off to Keaton Wetzel, who's from our consultant team, who's going to walk through some of the specific changes or some of the specific routes in this up.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, everyone. My name is Keaton Wetzel. I'm going to walk you through some of the most popular routes among those of you who are joining us tonight. And then I'm going to describe sort of the high-level benefits of this proposed network. And then I'm going to show you some of the online resources so you can find more information on your own. And then we're going to jump into the Q&A. And I know that a lot of the routes I'm going to cover in detail over the next 5 or 10 minutes won't necessarily answer questions or won't be about the specific routes that you're interested in. That's okay. That's why we have the Q&A. So let's just jump in real quick. So the first route we wanted to focus on is Route 48. So Route 48 is a very high ridership route. And what we've done in our proposed network is maintain the L shape so that it goes all the way to Penn's Landing, but we've made it a more straight and more direct route through Spring Garden and Strawberry Mansion in order to improve travel times. And we've also, as I mentioned, we heard many of you liked the fact that these routes are operating way more frequently on the weekends. And so if you look at the comparison of the schedule, this is different days of the week, weekdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And you have the existing headways in that light gray row, and then the proposed headways in the dark gray row. You can see that on weekdays, the route isn't changing much, but we're going to provide more frequent service for more of the day on Saturdays and Sundays.
Keaton, this is Dan. Sorry, the
microphone.
Yeah, it's breaking up a lot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Does that sound better if I move the mic closer?
Yeah, it was breaking up a little bit.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Hopefully that won't happen again. So yeah, I was just describing that the route will operate more frequently for more of the day, 7 days a week, and we've tried to keep that pattern consistent across most of the routes at sort of West Philly and Center City. Many of you also are interested in Route 38 or Route 44. So what we've done is we've combined these routes also in order to make both of them combined operate more frequently. And so what a combined Route 38 and 44 does is provide 30-minute service all day and on weekends. And then it also maintains service through Mantua, but what we've done is we've straightened out the route in Mantua and the Belmont District just a little bit. So again, it improves travel time so you can get from, say, Parkside Avenue into Center City in less time than you can today. And what this route does is, like I said, it operates every 30 minutes between Independence Hall and the intersection of Ford and Monument. And then every hour it continues past Ford and Monument all the way out to Ardmore. And so we just wanted to make it clear that that's the Route 44 part of this combined Route 38, Route 44. Another route that many of you are interested in is Route 32 and 49. And so this route is popular today only. It's popular especially at rush hours, but what we've done is we've combined Route 49 with the 32 so that it can be frequent 7 days a week. And so in order to do that, what we've done is straightened out the Route 49 a little bit. We've also extended it. So the new, so what I mean by that is now the Route 49 operates over the Spring Garden Street Bridge instead of operating via Market Street. And it operates every 15 minutes, 7 days a week. And then it also will travel faster because what we found is that the 49 gets caught in really horrible traffic, especially around the Street Station. And also it will make it so that folks in Mantua have a much more frequent connection north-south from their neighborhood into many of the employment sites around the hospitals and University of Pennsylvania.
Hey, Keaton, you're breaking up. So I think maybe I'll take it.
Sure, I'm sorry about that.
Okay. All right, next slide, please. All right, so Keaton was talking about the 32-49A combination. So, we heard pretty clearly from folks during the last round of engagement that Fairmount to University City connection is super important. And, there is quite a bit of ridership going between those 2 points. We have been proposing and will continue to propose, at least in this version, that we then combine Route 32 from up into the Manioc-Roxborough area with Route 49. This creates a new connection for folks, using that Route 32. It doesn't go into Center. We are proposing not to keep it in Center City still, but there are routes already in sort of the Manioc-Roxborough area that are going to Center City. So we thought creating this new connection into University City, and we looked at travel trend data, we looked at cell phone data, and this is a trip a lot of people are making. So we thought this gives people a new option if you're coming, from the lower northwest area. Next slide, please. So, and again, Keaton went through, the headway grids, but we are trying to, maintain consistent and steady services. Some reductions, but some general increases on where travel is heaviest. Next slide, please. So something that we have been proposing, for a while now is combining Route 42 west of the Schuylkill River with Route 40 east of the Schuylkill River. This creates a very high frequency crosstown service, 10 max service, going all the way through. This is, we have gotten a lot of feedback on this one, but we do like this. We think that this creates, again, like a very frequent crosstown that will see high ridership. It's 2 high ridership routes already. And, these are corridors where we'd likely look for some transit priority treatments as well. Next slide, please. And again, here you see the headway grid during the week. You see the 10-minute service, and then with the 15-minute service on the weekends. Next slide, please. So Route 12, if you remember in the initial draft proposal, there was no Route 12. We had really changed around a lot of the service around here. Route 7 had been essentially turned into a version of the Route 17. We talked to a lot of folks in the Grace Ferry area. They did not like this. So we did put back an adjusted version of Route 12. I've gotten some feedback on this thus far. We are proposing to terminate the route at 33rd and Dickinson. There's not a ton of activity going west across the river. And we are proposing to realign it so that it provides additional capacity on Chestnut and Walnut. This is something that we worked on with our operations group. Locust and Pine and those types of streets are very difficult for buses. We want to take advantage of the priority that we have on Chestnut, and we are working on potential priority treatments along Walnut Street. So we are proposing some adjustments to this route, but there's still the Grays Ferry connection into Center City. Next slide, please. Route 29, I know this is South Philly, but we are proposing to extend this to 49th and Woodland to create sort of that south to west connection. This would be a 15 max route, on weekdays and weekends. Next slide, please. And then Route 79, we did extend this route quite a bit. We are still proposing it to be a 10 max route, but it would travel from Pier 70 to 40th and Market. So it would connect to the L at 40th and Market. It would travel, through University City. So this again creates a new connection for folks in West Philly to South Philadelphia. Next slide, please. And again, here is the headway grid. You see the 10-minute service, during the week, and then the 15 max service on the weekends. And then Route 17, so this in the initial draft. So Route 17 and 33, which are north and south, we were initially proposed to be combined into one sort of linear north-south route, a la Route 47. We got a ton of feedback on this one. We are proposing to retain the current routing for the 17, though shortening it a bit at 20th and Johnston. This reestablishes that direct connection into Center City, from South Philadelphia. And then we are proposing to keep the 33 more similar to what it is now. We are proposing some minor alignment changes on the north end of the route, so that the north and south ends are closer to each other. It would go from Venango Loop to Penn's Landing. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of this draft versus the existing draft? So one of the things that we're trying to do is create more access to frequent service. So you can see more people have access to frequent service in this updated draft, about 18%, and there are more jobs within a quarter mile of frequent transit. And this is weekdays at noon, but this holds true for most times, including weekend. Next slide. And then for low income folks, for racial minorities, for older adults and people with disabilities, again, you can see greater access to frequent service. This means less waiting, more time spent, getting where you need to go and doing other things. So, we are, again, one of the goals in this project is to create a more connected set of frequent routes. So, these numbers are not as high as they were in the first draft because we were streamlining things to such an intense degree. But even though we made a lot of revisions, we are still, retaining that improved access to frequent service. Next slide. So, we're not done. We have a lot of work left to do. And, I'm going to talk a little bit now about what we have planned over the next few weeks. Next slide. We have several weeks of engagement set up with a lot of different types of events. We're going to try to meet people where they are at bus stops and transportation centers, where they're waiting for the bus, where they're, running errands, things like that. We're trying to make our materials, easier to understand, easier to use. We want people to really clearly see what's happening to each individual route that's part of the network, and what has and hasn't changed. And I think most importantly, we want people to understand what is in this update versus what was in the previous draft. We put a lot of material out. Some of it is highly technical. We want to make sure people understand what's on the table, what is no longer being considered, and how it affects them. Next slide, please. All of the materials that we have are on our project website, septabusrevolution.com. We have maps. We have full system maps. We have a slider map, so you can easily compare, or more easily compare, the existing network to this updated draft. We have individual maps of both the entire proposed revised draft, as well as different sub areas of the draft. And then we have a line by line breakdown of each individual route. We will be publishing change sheets for each individual route in the system, which we will link in that section as well. So, there's going to be updates pretty regularly. Hopefully, you'll find this interesting, you'll find it informative, and obviously, all you have to do to provide input is click on that share your feedback link. That'll open up a dialog box. You just fill it in. The email comes directly to me. It gets reviewed. It gets put with comments that are of a similar ilk. And when the technical team gets back together again in May, we are going to, again, just like we did last round, comb through the comments, look at the data, and make adjustments. Next slide, please. So you are at a webinar. This is one of the things that we're doing to try to keep people, abreast of the project and aware of what's going on. So this one is scheduled. This one is focused on West Philly and Center City. And I noticed that Keaton didn't cover some of the routes in West Philadelphia particularly. So, I'll cover those in a minute, but the focus on this, but each webinar focuses on a different geographic area. So next week is Northwest. The week after May 1st is the Northeast. And then on May 8th, we'll be covering the 4 suburban counties, at that webinar. Next slide, please. We have a project bus, so it's a wrapped bus. We use it to transport materials to and from different events. We've had 6 events thus far. We were around the Municipal Services Building last Wednesday. We're going to be at locations throughout the city and the region. We have a few more scheduled, through May 4th. If you're out and about, please come talk to one of us. Please, a SEPTA person at one of these events. We'll happily walk you through different parts of the network, answer your questions, that type of thing. Next slide, please. And then we're also doing community meetings. So we've had 3 thus far. We've got 2 more this week, and then we have some every week. We're still trying to get a couple more dates finalized here, but in general, we'll be running this through the week of May 12th. Next slide. And to kind of, again, just sort of get everyone up to speed on where we are in the process. We are in the process of sharing our updated draft. Again, this is based off of all the feedback we got from our fall 2022 engagement. I think we wound up ultimately changing about 70% of the initial proposal. So, we don't anticipate being finished, but we have been responsive to sort of what people are saying. We are going to be doing community engagement through May. We have a lot of events scheduled. If you're interested in a conversation outside of that schedule, let us know. We'll try to get something on the calendar. Over the summer, we'll be finalizing the network. We'll be, looking at making sure operationally it makes sense, making sure the math works, making sure it's budget neutral. We'll be looking at our bus stops to determine, what level of stop rebalancing that we may want to pursue. And then in fall or in September, we will have hearings. So if you are familiar with our traditional annual service plan process, you'll know that when we want to make service changes, we have hearings. That is a requirement in our enabling legislation. So in September of this year, we will have a series of hearings. We will not have just one. We will have them at different locations throughout the region. They'll take place over several weeks. This will provide people with another opportunity to provide feedback, albeit in a different setting. There's a hearing examiner. Public feedback is introduced as testimony. There will also be an online component to the hearing, so people can provide testimony online in case they can't attend one of the hearings. So, we take what people think really seriously. We want to make sure it lines up with our own expectations, with what the data says, but we do want to make sure that people's feedback is reviewed and considered. Assuming that the hearings take place in September, and I don't see why they wouldn't, our goal would be to go to the SEPTA board by the end of the year. So by December, we would go to the SEPTA board seeking adoption of a new bus network, and then the implementation process would formally begin in 2024. It would begin obviously it would begin as soon as we could in terms of communicating. We want to make sure people understand, what's changing, when it's changing, what alternatives they have if something that they're used to is going away or being changed. So that will begin early in 2024, but we wouldn't anticipate making any service modifications until summer of 2024. So with the June schedule change, and then most of the service modifications would go into effect in fall of 2024. So that's the year ahead. I think now we can go to Q&A now, Chris, if that's okay.
Yep, and I fixed my microphone, so we shouldn't have any more issues.
All right, great.
Yeah. Dan, do you think this is a good time to walk people through the website? It should only take a few seconds.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Keen. So Keen's just going to spend a few minutes, just making sure the website is familiar to people.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of questions in the Q&A about how to access these resources, so this should be useful for you all. So if you go to the project website, it's called septabusrevolution.com. Click on the updated draft network at the top, and it'll take you to this homepage. And this should get you all the information you need. And there's a number of ways to interact with the draft network. The first is if you click on the system maps. What this does is it pulls up a PDF that's basically just a giant map of the existing network and the proposed network. So you can see sort of what it looks like, and you can zoom in at different levels of detail. There's also a slider map, and this is a really cool feature because what it allows you to do is see the SEPTA network as it exists today on the left side of this slider, and then you move it over to the right side and you can see what the proposal looks like. And every route is color coded based on its typical frequency during the day, 7 days a week. And so you all can see, many of you live in West Philadelphia, many more of these routes are becoming purple and red, which means that we propose that they're going to be more frequent, 15 and 10-minute routes, 7 days a week, and generally more straightened out. And then probably the most useful and highest level of detail is at this link, which is a remix map. So if you click that, this is an interactive map. I saw, Joan, you asked about this in the Q&A, how you get to this interactive map. And so what this does is it allows you to zoom in, or you can select the route on the left side. And so say you are interested in learning about Route G, you can select Route G, and it'll highlight it and show you the proposed alignment of Route G, and then how frequently it's expected, or we propose that it will operate weekdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So this should be a really useful resource for you. And if you want, you can also add a comment in there. So you just have to click this comment button, and then you click along where you want to post your comment, and SEPTA and we will see what you have to say about that route. And then the last sort of thing is, if you are interested in learning about a specific route, you can click underneath the route by route information on your route. Let's go down again to the G, and it'll give you a quick description of what's proposed for the G. So hopefully that should allow you all to come back and study any of the other route changes that we don't get to during today's Q&A. And I'm going to leave this up so we can go through the remix to help answer any of the questions you all have. Chris, you want to guide the discussion.
Or someone has asked, how many revisions have there been, and will you provide the dates of the revisions?
I'll start. So this is the second full draft. So if we didn't, we usually, we going back a little bit from a process perspective, in spring and summer of last year, so spring 22, we shared two scenarios. These were not really these were more schematic in nature. They were two different ways of approaching the bus network. So that was spring of last year. So I wouldn't consider that a draft, but just sort of more like two conceptual scenarios. The first draft was shared in fall of 2022. The second draft is this. So this is the revised draft. When we go to hearing in the fall, that would, I think, I would qualify that as a recommended draft, and that will again be based off of the feedback that we've gotten between, the two rounds of engagement that we've done. So, that's roughly when, I don't have exact dates of when things were launched, but we could find that. But in general, the first full draft was fall of 22, and this, being the second draft is spring of 23.
Okay, is there a plan to keep revising the system as you find parts that could be more efficient?
Yeah, so SEPTA does have an annual service plan process that, where we do make, sort of tweaks annually to different routes. But this being a totally new network with lots of changes, we would be monitoring it very carefully. Part of this project will be an updated set of service standards with updated service monitoring procedures. And we would certainly consider making adjustments, if we find things that don't work as well as we thought, or, or better ideas come along. So, I think we understand that we have to be a bit more responsive with our bus network. And so, yeah, we would be considering, we will always consider different ways of improving things.
Hey, someone else has asked, the SEPTA bus network currently does not meet the advertised frequency of service. How can we believe the new plan will meet the promised goals?
So I think this person is probably asking about the sort of the operator issues and the operator shortages we have now. So it's something that we're, acutely aware of. We're trying to hire more operators so that we can run the system. But I think that, it's a challenge now, but it will be a challenge going forward. And I think it's on us to kind of, ensure that we put out the best service that we can, and that, we bring in operators to run the system. But yeah, we anticipate there being, the same challenges that we have right now. We're going to retain challenges, and it's an industry-wide challenge.
Okay, and we have another question about, will there be buses to museums on the Parkway?
So we are proposing to remove a lot of the service on the Parkway. There are still a lot of buses within a quarter mile, which by our service standards definition is well served. We are doing this for a few different reasons. Ridership at a lot of those destinations is extremely low. That's not trips people are making on a regular basis. In terms of the Parkway specifically, though, operationally, it's very challenging for us. Buses are constantly being detoured off the Parkway. We want to be able to cross the Parkway, but we don't necessarily want to run operations on the Parkway. We have some service going up that's north of 25th Street, but south of 25th, which is where some of our most acute challenges are, we don't have service on the Parkway.
I do want to talk about Route 30 and 43, which will go in front of the art museum, and I think is a pretty significant change. Maybe this is a good time to talk about it. So we've not changed this route much from the last iteration of the Bus Revolution network, but we've proposed combining Route 30 and Route 43 to create a brand new frequent route that operates along Spring Garden Street, and then along Vine Street all the way out to 69th Street Station. And so what this route does is, by combining two infrequent routes that operate sometimes as infrequently as once an hour. It allows a route to operate every 15 minutes end to end all day long. And so we have heard from many riders that they don't necessarily like waiting an hour or so for the next bus. And so what this means is that you can go out to any of the bus stops along this route and know that you're not going to have to wait more than a quarter of an hour to get across town. And so we're pretty excited about this change, and also maintains, that front door service to the art museum and many of the commercial areas in West Philly and Spring Garden.
Okay, we have another question. It already feels like the revolution is a bit dated, e.g., there really is no transit east, especially east or west, in or around the developments north of Vine and east of Market. Are there any considerations to ensuring that rapid residential development will be captured by the plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is somewhat similar to the question previously. I think, this is not a service expansion plan. We would love to be in a position to add new service, but we're not, that's not the position we're in right now. The mandate for this project is really focused on what we can do with the available resources, with the resources that we have available right now. In terms of service along Vine Street, I think that's something that we'll have to keep a close eye on. There's a lot of north-south routes crossing Vine Street. So, there's, obviously Broad, but there's, service on 11th and 12th. There's service on 7th and 8th via the 47. There's service on 3rd and 4th via the 57. So there are a lot of routes that, while they don't travel directly on Vine Street, they do cross Vine Street. And so, and in terms of going east-west, if that's what you're hinting at, there isn't really a way to do that, in this draft, but it's something that we have to keep an eye on, not just along Vine Street and that development, but anywhere where, we see new residential coming online. But unfortunately, adding service right now is not part of this plan.
Okay, and will any of the canceled King of Prussia line funds be put towards the bus revolution? And if so, what will those dollars be spent on?
Some of the money that was allotted to the King of Prussia Rail project is being shifted over to trolley modernization, which is, the upgrade of our West Philadelphia trolley system, so that we can make it an accessible system. So that's where a large chunk of money is going to. We're also going to use a chunk of that money to work on to procure new cars from the Market Frankfurt line. The problems that we're having on the Market Frankfurt line, part of it are definitely sort of the safety and security issues that we talked about earlier, but part of it is also the cars are not doing well and they're constantly being shoveled in and out for maintenance. So replacing the cars on that line is really paramount. So those are two capital projects that are really important. I do want to note that we did identify in the last capital budget some funds to really, for the first time ever, focus on bus improvements. So many of you may be aware that Wissahickon Transportation Center is being upgraded. So that's a significant project that's going to create lots of new connections, out in the lower Northwest. But we're also looking to use that money to work with the city and our other partners on transit priority projects, to, again, focus on speed and reliability, as well as making some, bus stop improvements, where there's high ridership and where you haven't been able to make any yet. So, that's where I think a lot of our capital focus is going to be, which, that's where the bulk of our riders are. So we want to make sure that, the people that are using the system the most can benefit from those funds.
Okay, we have a comment that the charts don't specify or identify the stops, so it's impossible to determine what stops the bus is making.
So if you visit the remix map and you just zoom in to the route, what it'll do is it'll show the stops in both directions. So right now it's showing the inbound route, and you can hover over each stop and it'll tell you the name of the stop. And then if you click to outbound, you'll also be able to see the stops. So that is available on the Remix map. You just have to zoom in to a certain extent in order to see it at a certain point. They're hidden.
Great, thank you. We also have another question. Why are there so many stops on Walnut and Chestnut? The other streets are helpful for people who live several blocks south.
So one of the things that we're trying, so going back and to sort of the earlier stage of this project. So one of the key findings of sort of the first phase of this project, the existing conditions analysis, is that we were providing way too much service going into Center City. We have a lot of excess capacity going into Center City. So overall, we are looking to reduce some of that service in Center City. It was a lot more dramatic in the previous draft. We put quite a bit of that service back based on the feedback we've gotten. But one of the things we are trying to do is consolidate service onto fewer streets. There's a few reasons for that. The one reason is that it does give us some leverage to work with the city of Philadelphia specifically, but also some other partners on transit priority projects, whether it's bus lanes or whether it's bus stop improvements or transit signal priority. It gives us leverage to do that. Second is that we understand people do use the 12 around Locust and Pine. Locust is about 1,000 feet away from Chestnut Walnut, and it's close to the Lombard South grouping as well. So we have a lot of service in this area. And we are trying to prioritize certain streets that we feel like we can, put priority service on, and again, sort of make improvements on. So that's why we are looking at consolidating some services on specific streets. I think ultimately what you'll find is there is a little bit less service on all of these streets than there is in the current network. But we're confident that there's enough capacity to carry the people using the service, using transit.
Okay, and we have another question. I live in Overbrook Park, and the bus revolution is eliminating the bus routes 103 and 106. Can you give us an update on the 31 bus route? The bus revolution shows that the Route 31 bus will remain the same. Can you also tell us, will this bus continue through Haverford Avenue?
So we did put back a version of Route 31. We heard this based off of feedback. In the original draft, it was proposed to be eliminated. It is like, highly duplicative of the L in parts, and there's other routes that it's duplicative of. But we heard, very, very, there was a very vocal group that wanted to retain it, but we are proposing to modify it so that it does provide service along Market Street. We are proposing, as Keaton talked about, that combined 3043 route along Vine Street and Spring Garden. So we thought it made sense again to kind of create this sort of grid of step ladders, this step ladder of these different like sort of straight crosstown routes. The 31 does cover large portions of Market Street. There's still going to be direct service via the 3844 combo in parts of Mantua and Belmont, but we are proposing some modifications. In terms of the 103 and the 106, we are proposing to consolidate routes 105 and 106 into one route that comes down Lancaster Avenue and then serves 69th Street. And Route 103, we are proposing, or what is currently 103, we are proposing to turn into a more of a, sort of focus it more on Delaware County to serve the airport. I do want to note there's one other yellow line there. Keaton, can you click on that? Yeah, that one. We did realign this route so that it provides some additional capacity going into 69th Street from Lawrence Park Shopping Center. I don't anticipate a lot of people on this call will want to get to Lawrence Park, but for people in Overbrook Park, it does provide another option to get to 69th Street.
Great.
Hey, Chris, can I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the questions, and I've noticed a few people frustrated that we haven't addressed Route 32. So I just want to talk about Route 32 quickly. So we are Sorry, my dog is coughing. So we are proposing to realign Route 32, or effectively combining it with Route 49. There's a few reasons for this. Going to where the route originates in Roxborough, there are a lot of routes in Roxborough that are going to Center City. There are none that go to University City, so that explains that desire. In terms of Fairmount and sort of points north, there are other ways for folks to get into Center City. We looked really closely at the ridership on the 32, and what we saw was that most of the people that use the 32 are off the bus by Walnut Street, which is very close to Market Street, and the 48 is providing that direct, that direct service from Fairmount, through Center City all the way to the river. So that was part of our reasoning behind Route 32. There's a lot of other service in Fairmount. There's still the Route 7 going south. If you live kind of on the east end of the neighborhood, potentially you could use this Route 33. There's service on Spring Garden Street. If you live north in the neighborhood, there's service on Girard. So there's lots of options, but there was not, but we thought that this was something that we could do because it allows us to create that new connection up into Roxborough and then down into University City. So I hope that was okay for the people that were.
Yeah. Okay, we do have another question. When do you expect to finalize the changes?
Sure. So we have a significant amount of work left to do. We just launched this draft about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. We'll be doing public engagement through May. And then we'll be reconvening later in May to begin going through all the comments, figuring out, what we think we need to adjust based on the new feedback that we've gotten. And then we will, we will begin preparations to go to hearing. And then the hearing would, take place in September. The hearing would provide another opportunity for people to provide input, although it'd be, like I said before, it's a very different type of setting, but your feedback will still be taken very seriously. Then, after the hearings are complete, we anticipate, probably making revisions after that as well, in anticipation of going to seek formal adoption by the SEPTA board by the end of the year. In terms of going into effect, the changes would begin in August of 24, and then continue through the fall. So we would start, not August, through summer. So we would begin the changes in June of 2024. I apologize, I misspoke. And then we would, complete as many of the changes as we could that September. There will be a lot of engagement around focused on implementation, so that people understand, what's changing, when it's changing, that type of thing.
All right, we have another question. Can you put out maps for individual routes with more street names?
Yeah, so we are in the process of putting out some additional information for some of the additional changes. I think those should be posted, within the week. So once those launch, we'll have, if you're here at this webinar, it means you've signed up for our email list. So once those change sheets have been posted, we'll make sure that there's an email blast that goes out to everyone so that they can look up their routes.
And we have a comment. I noticed that the 38 and 44 ends up at 5th and Market. This is a random spot in some ways, especially with no north and south service on 5th and 6th.
That's a good question. So every bus route needs an end of line location. It's a location where operators can take a break, use the restroom and that type of thing. So in this situation, and this is an end of line in our current network, it's where the 38 and 44 currently end. It's fairly random as locations go, but it provides restroom access and there's enough curb space there for a few buses. The buses simply circle the block and then go back west. So it's just sort of like a reality of the way we operate and sort of how we have to handle those types of situations.
Okay, we have a question about the Route 49. It's currently through The Route 49 is currently through Fairmount, is standing room only during rush hour, but it appears no access to 30th Street and Penn.
So we are proposing to realign it so that it crosses at Spring Garden. In our analysis of the ridership of this route, the vast majority of people are going from Fairmount to University City. That connection stays intact. The crossing at Spring Garden, instead of going through Center City and crossing at Market, will save people time. And it will help alleviate some of the issues we're going to have when the Market Street Bridge goes under reconstruction and we have to detour everything anyway. So this is something that we'll continue to look at. I see a lot of feedback in the chat about it, so we'll keep looking at this. But this is something that we looked at really closely, and it is, very the ridership on the 49 is very driven by the Fairmount to University City connection, and we think we cover a lot of that by crossing at Spring Garden. And we also speed up the service and will make it more reliable at the same time.
Okay, we have another question. Do any of the maps show the exact streets that the new routes will run on? And if not, can that be made possible?
Sorry, can you say that question again, Chris? You phased out for a second there.
Oh, she's muted. The question was about if any of the maps show the names of the streets that the route operates on, and if not, if that resource can be provided. So right now, the way to see which streets the route operates on is through Remix. Like I said, if you hover over the stops, it'll tell you what street the route is on, or if you zoom in close enough, you'll see the street labels. But in the coming days, as Dan noted, we'll upload individual route maps for every single route, and you'll be able to see in very clear detail what are the street names that it operates on.
Yeah, thanks, Keaton.
Okay, we have another question. I like the 2665 extension, but I have a question about the proposed 40 route, aka the 508. I feel instead it is good, but it should also serve the hospitals.
Dave, this is a good question. So we have aligned it to go straight. It's the red line, Keaton.
Oh, 2665?
No, I think they're talking about the 4240 combinations. Is that 508?
Oh, 1 second. That's a 511.
All right, sorry, which one is?
Route 508 is a new route. Here we go.
Oh, I
So
see.
This is sort of similar to the 40.
Okay, yeah. So, we're down in the where the hospitals are, we have some pretty serious operational issues down here. I thought they were talking about the 4240 because that's something we've gotten a lot of feedback about. We'll continue to look at these, but there are more people sort of going through than going to the hospitals, so we favored that travel. So, but we'll continue looking down here. I think the issue by CHOP and things like that, or there's no natural place for us to lay over a bus or end a line, and that makes it difficult to take this bus further. I think we'd like to take it a little further in, but right now we haven't been able to find and secure a location that works for us. Thank you. That's a good question.
Okay, is there a way for someone to determine how they will get from point A to point B in the proposed network?
Yeah, and I've seen a few other questions related to this. If you use Transit, which is a really good app for particularly like bus users, there is a way to see how that would compare. I think because so many people have expressed this, I think we should probably send an email out about this to the list so that people know how to use that app. But that's the best way to really determine sort of how you would get around in this new network versus the current one. It's a trip planner, and I think it would be a really effective tool for you. But it's an app, you can get it on an iPhone or an Android, but that's the most useful way for you to do that.
Okay, and will there be buses on Broad Street to the Kimmel Center?
Yeah, so I did talk about the 32 earlier, but so that we are not proposing to retain that connection, but we do have two buses, the 4 and the 27, both going down Broad Street.
I think we only have time for a few more. Can you repeat the transfer fare breakdown? How much will it cost to transfer and how long for that transfer be valid?
So we just revised our fare policy. So the first two transfers, I believe, in the 2 hours are free. So there is no additional cost for transferring.
Okay, and I think our final question of the night, will the 38 bus maintain stops on Parkside Avenue and into Center City at Fifth and Market?
So we have it, we have the 38-44 combo hitting Parkside around Concourse and coming in to Center City that way. Yeah. So, and then there'll be different services on the other side of Parkside, but there will be service, around Concourse and Parkside coming into Center City. All right.
And it does go all the way into Center City, all the way.
Yeah, yeah, it goes to that random location at Fifth and Market. But yeah, so I think we can wrap up now, Chris. I think I do again want to thank everyone for making time for us tonight. Keep the comments coming in. We do promise they'll all be reviewed, they'll all be considered. And feel free to get in touch. If you have other questions and comments and things like that. If you're free to attend one of our meetings, definitely come to those. And yeah, just thank you everyone. I really appreciate everyone's time and hope to see you in the future.